Thank you, Dick. Yes, something new for tonight's Oklahoma Votes 2012 primary election coverage. A rotating panel of 8 different people, make that 7, one dropped out tonight, with varying political viewpoints and backgrounds ranging from members of the legislature to journalists to political observers. And for the first time, you can get involved in the discussion. Send us a tweet at OK Votes or send us an email at onr@oeta.tv. Pose your questions or comments, and we'll discuss them as time allows. On our first interactive panel tonight, Pat McGuigan, editor of the City Sentinel, a weekly newspaper, also editor of CapitolBeatOK, an online news service that focuses on the state capitol, and a political analyst for Griffin Communications and washes dishes on the side. Larry Stein, a longtime political observer and commentator, and journalist Arnold Hamilton, who's also an editor of the Oklahoma Observer newspaper. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time tonight. Appreciate it. Expect a lively conversation from the three of you. We've heard lots of comments already tonight about what things mean. 61 people already elected. You know, they didn't draw opponents. What's your take on that whole concept? Are we just that apathetic about running for political office these days? Go ahead, Pat. You start.
Well, I'd say, although there's some very interesting races, House District 88, the Democratic primary, is one I've been keeping an eye on because it's my part of town. There are some very interesting races, but I think that number 61 is illustrative of kind of where we are in modern politics, which is incumbents are usually safe. There's some exceptions this year, as Dick pointed out, and some very interesting races. But I see it kind of as a continuation with a different cast of characters and some different coloration, the Tea Party and so forth. Well,
the Tea Party is definitely a factor. Arnold?
Yeah, it's amazing to me that we had that many go unchallenged, because there is, generally speaking, even here in Oklahoma, where economically we seem to be doing better than the rest of the country, thanks to oil and gas largely, I'm just amazed because I sense a lot of voter discontent out there. But I think it says something about modern American politics and the money that's involved in it, and what you're exposing your family and your personal life to, that a lot of people are just saying, you know what, I'm going to give somebody else, I'm going to let somebody else do it.
Could any of us, Larry, actually run for political office at this table?
None of us could, but you know, it really says two things. It says you've either done a heck of a job or you've screwed it up so bad nobody wants the job now. So I think it could be a combination of the two.
Well, it is interesting. We mentioned this thing about incumbents, and Wayne Green has done some really good research here for the Tulsa World, pointing out the impact of term limits on the number of lawmakers returning to office every election cycle has now passed the term limits going into effect. In other words, incumbents are getting reelected left and right. Well, so why are we really worried tonight that maybe some of them might get ousted?
You have 12 years, though. I mean, there is a steady turnover in the legislative body that you didn't necessarily have in an earlier era, but incumbents still enjoy the advantages, the point you were just making. And the data bears that out. It's always best to look at the raw numbers rather than polling data or your hunches. And that says a lot, the 61.
And I suspect a lot of people end up, they figure they'll just wait until it becomes an open seat, because a lot of times it is difficult to dislodge an incumbent who has a lot of financial support from the special interests.
And I think that the other factor is that you talk about Tea Party, which is really an amalgamation of Republicans and conservative Democrats and other folks that are concerned about issues. And I think that what you're seeing is in areas where there's a galvanizing opposition to what the incumbent is doing, which is against the wishes of the people, the Tea Party's getting active, and they're targeting particular areas instead of going at a shotgun approach.
What do we think? Liebman, the most likely to
That's the word on the
maybe
street.
Go down?
I think there's a couple
That's what everybody keeps saying. Guy Liebman, member of the House of Representatives, for those of you who may not know.
Northwest Oklahoma City area.
Yeah, and truth of the matter is, Representative Liebman's been in public office a long time, was on the city council for many years in Oklahoma City, and never really had much of a contest.
And this is the guy who's running against him, and apparently he kills alligators, so he must be tough. He's a young guy, Mike Turner, and he's and the big winner in all these things are the guys who are making these printed brochures, because they're very expensive.
Yeah,
so
well, there's big money tied up.
Big money.
And Liebman's district has changed significantly from what he represented when he was on the city council. So it's a different world. A lot of these folks don't know him personally.
Yeah, he has a 10-point lead, I'm told, at the moment. Yeah. So, of course, it's very early returns. Anything can happen.
Well, one that's kind of an exception to the type that we've cast for this year is Sally Kern in District 84, because she's the Tea Party oriented candidate and being challenged by Curtis Moore, who has at least made noises sounding as if he objected to some of her priorities. So she's a Tea Party person who's an incumbent that's probably going to win.
Okay, and so Sally Kern's going to, well, at the moment, Sally Kern,
think she'll survive.
way out front.
I think she'll survive.
That's okay. I think we actually have our first tweet. I'm just looking over here. Here to your field of political queries. Come on, Mr. Computer, help me out here. Well, it just went blank on me, so we'll get back to that in just a minute. Okay, so we've already identified one we think that's vulnerable. Anybody else come to mind that's also kind of on the brink? It's certainly not Clark Jolly.
Yeah, I wouldn't put it out because, you know, you're talking about a low possible turnout today because there could be an overconfidence, and when you're talking about the Tea Party activists, look what's happened in the Tulsa district. I mean, they're neck and neck, 50%. Those folks are the Tea Party conservatives that are upset with the current incumbent, and that's the same kind of thing we saw in Scott Walker up in Wisconsin. You could see a great turnout of dedicated people that have these dates tattooed on their fingers. They're ready to go to the polls today and then in August as well.
There's basically a cluster of 11 House races, and you'd have to believe that 8 or 9 of those incumbents survive, maybe 10. And again, incumbency still gets you there, but the Tea Party presence and intensity has made those races more interesting. That's why we've all been paying attention the last 2 weeks.
I'm beginning to wonder what these labels mean anymore. When you start suggesting that Clark Jolly and Brian Crane are not conservatives, then what exactly is a conservative in Oklahoma?
Well, you know,
has the state moved so far right you need a telescope to find a big percentage of the people?
I think really it's a breakout of either it's a pro-establishment or a pro-challenge to the establishment. And the problem is that in districts like the one up in Edmond, it's not that they don't like the person, it's they don't like what they're doing because they're increasing the size of government and they're increasing the regulations of government, and that's what they didn't vote for.
In 1980, Ronald Reagan said sometimes the right hand doesn't know what the far right hand is doing.
And I think that applies tonight. Okay, we'll be back. Remember, tweet us, send us an email, send us your questions, your comments. We'll be happy to talk about them on the air. Let's take a look now at those senators who ran unopposed.